Now, a lot of things people know about me. One thing you may not know is that I am born again. Surprising for a Jew, perhaps. In fact, I'm born again 3 times. The first time I was born was in 1964. But before I start, I need to get a volunteer from the audience. And somebody who doesn't mind, just anybody. I'm looking at Tony because I think I could guilt him. Could I have a volunteer? I won't make you come up. You can stay in your seat. Luke, I knew I could count on you. Luke, this is your toy. I bought it from Kmart. Now, I've been told on a number of occasions that I seem to mention the word vagina quite a bit. So I thought maybe Luke could keep me in check. Luke, every time I say vagina, let's just kind of put it to a test drive, just so we know. So I was walking down the street and I happened to see a vagina. So the first time I was born was 1964, and my mother had had a lot of problems with my sister. It was like, I don't know, 1 million hours of childbirth. And I came along and I just kind of flew right out. She said all the doctor needed was a catcher's mitt. I was 10 pounds, 2 ounces. When I was old enough to know where babies come from, I felt really sorry for my mother, and more importantly for her vagina. So things went okay for a while. I mean, like most kids, I didn't really know there was anything unusual about my parents. It took me a while to realize that what I was experiencing was not what other people experienced. So for instance, my mother would have long conversations with dead relatives. My Aunt Rosalind died when I was 8. I got lectured through my mother, the channel of Rosalind, up until the time I left home at 16. Your Aunt Rosalind thinks that you are too sexy and you have to button up your top button, and you should never ride horses because you can hurt your vagina. So to give you an example of the kind of thing I didn't know, I guess the real moment that I realized that my parents and my mother, more importantly, were different from other people's parents happened when I was 6 years old in the first grade. So my teacher, Mrs. Mahan, who I was constantly bringing things to, and I didn't understand why, but I thought about her in a certain way. She was trying to teach us the difference between a product and a brand name. So like the difference between tissue and Kleenex. So she asked all the kids to say what their favorite brand of soap was. And one kid went Ivory, and one kid went Dawn. You know, but I knew I was going to blow Mrs. Mahan out of the water because I had the best soap in the world. We had hundreds of bars of this soap growing up, and it smelled good and it was creamy, you know, so I shot my hand in the air and I said, Ramada in! Everybody started laughing. I thought, you know, perhaps they didn't hear me correctly, so I'll do it again. My family's favorite soap is Ramada in. No, in fact, this was not a normal thing. The kids were hysterical. Then I went home, I was totally perplexed. I started to look around the house. All of the towels said Motel 8. There was a big bowl of ketchup packets from McDonald's in the center. I went to a friend's house and her mother pulled out this giant bottle of ketchup. And I was like dumbfounded. And I asked, you know, how many packets do you have to squeeze to like fill that up? She said, no, as a matter of fact, normal people have bottles of ketchup. They don't wipe out McDonald's, you know, like all the mustards were Burger King. You know. So I was starting to think, you know, my family might be just a little bit different. So then when I started to realize that my family was a little different, I also started to realize that I could make people laugh when I told them about my family. I mean, otherwise it was terribly embarrassing. You know, like, we would go to a supermarket. My mother would drag my brother and my sister and me to a supermarket. And she would have a stack of coupons. It was like this. And she would fill up her shopping cart, and each of us would have a shopping cart. She would get to the cash register, and by the time she was done with her coupons, not only was everything free, but they owed her money. The Pathmart in Eatontown, New Jersey had to start a policy, just because of my mother, that you might very well get all the food for free, but they weren't going to pay you to take it away. There are all-you-can-eat restaurants that are no longer all-you-can-eat restaurants because of my family. The Brown Round in Monmouth County, New Jersey used to have Wednesday night all-you-can-eat fish fry. They were famous for it. You would go, I think it was like $6.99, it was all the fried flounder that you could eat. So my mother would start starving us. You know, you come home from school, you're hungry. We weren't allowed to eat anything. We would get to the ground round. She's like, don't touch the peanut shells, don't touch the bread, don't fill up on the cheap stuff. The fish would come out basket after basket. I mean, no family ever ate that much fish. And what we couldn't eat all wound up in my mother's bag. Do you remember Felix the cat with the magical bag? She could put like flounder for 50 people in this bag. So one day the Ground Round just discontinued their famous fish fry just because of my mother. So things were going along okay. I mean, like I said, my life was a little bit embarrassing, but I discovered that I could make people laugh, so not so bad. We moved around a lot, and so ultimately we were in Bradley Beach, New Jersey, and I was having a great time. Some kids were trying to pick on me, and the leader of the gang was a bully named Louis Scarface, who had a scar down his face. It was a Puerto Rican gang. My parents had somehow not noticed that all the Jews had left. And I was what you might call chubby. Kmart called me husky, but basically I was fat. I somehow figured out how to jump in the air and land sitting on the face of Louis Scarface. So basically I suffocated him with my vagina. From that point on, at least in Bradley Beach, nobody messed with me because they didn't know much about vaginas, but they knew they didn't want one sitting on their face at that age. And then I embarked on a career of shoplifting and stealing strips of aluminum siding and skiing down the alley, and I was having a fantastic time. Well, my parents were afraid that I might turn into a juvenile delinquent. So they decided to move me to a very wealthy town, Rumson, where most of the kids were driven around, possibly by a chauffeur. Certainly their parents had a Cadillac. My mom had a Nova. My dad had a Ford pickup truck, and we had a camper parked outside, which cemented us as the white trash on the block. And all of the kids, when I went into the school, they all were impeccably dressed in what looked like yachting clothes to me, like khaki pants and Izod Lacroix alligator shirts, and everything was a name brand. And we were dressed head to toe in Kmart blue light specials. Does anyone remember what a blue light special was? My mother would position herself in the center of Kmart so she could be equal distance. And when they made, ladies, there's a blue light special in lingerie, Hanes underwear half off, and she would just grab us and scream, blue light special! We'd have to go to blue light special. So I showed up to school dressed head to toe in the blue light special. So naturally, these rich Rumson kids wanted to pick on me. But I had become possessed by the spirit of Henny Youngman. I was like a 12-year-old Henny Youngman. So I was like, you think this is cheap? You should have seen the lady who sold it to me. And then if that didn't make them laugh, it would happen in the cafeteria. I would just show them my lunch. My mother had decided that instead of giving me a sandwich, she was going to give me a lunch that would kind of build ingenuity. So there was cheese, and then a McDonald's or a Burger King mustard packet, and then bread. The cheese, not only was it just a slice of cheese, it was more likely a cheese end. Now, does anyone know what a cheese end is? Cheese end is like the guy who's in the deli. You know, when he gets to the end of the cheese, he doesn't want to cut his fingers off. So that big chunk, they sell it as a cheese end. And it can't be cut. I mean, you could melt it. That's about all you could do. So I would have this cheese end, this boulder. And the idea was that I was going to make the world's thickest cheese sandwich. So that was bad. Maybe that was bad enough. But every item was wrapped in a note. So the cheese was, have a piece of cheese and know your mother loves you. The mustard, you know, a little mustard more than I had as a child. The bread, this would have fed children in Auschwitz for a week. I'm 12 years old, like explaining what Auschwitz is, you know. Then I put this monstrosity together, and it's like, you're almost dislocating your jaw. Not to mention the fact that I have to say, you know, you eat one cheese end sandwich and you're not going to the bathroom till morning. Nothing. You know, she should have been, maybe if she'd made like a cheese end and prune sandwich, had a shot, you know, with like a Metamucil chaser and chips. Anyway, but so things were going okay. And I felt I had a lot of tomboy power. You know, I had learned that I could sit on people's face and suffocate them with my vagina. Oh. You were slow. And then what happened was, it seemed like I went through puberty overnight. Like I went to sleep and I woke up and Bette Midler was sitting on my chest. I was 12 years old, and all of a sudden, it wasn't like a slow, gradual thing, it was like C-cups. And it's like, I mean, where was my tomboy power, my tomboy chest? I had these horrifying things. It was too traumatic for words. So I decided I would hide them. I put on layers and layers of clothing, and I looked a little bit like the Michelin Tire Man. And then my mother also neglected to tell us that puberty meant you had to start wearing deodorant. So then I was the Michelin Tire Man smelling like a homeless person. It was really not a pretty picture. And from the 7th and 8th grade, I so submerged myself in these layers trying to hide my breasts that I became a very quiet, withdrawn person, I know. It was actually voted runner-up for most quiet. People who know me have trouble believing that. So, the summer after 8th grade, my mother bamboozled a free vacation to Miami Beach. Now, we had gotten used to being schlepped off to Florida because my parents bought some horrible piece of land in Panama City, Florida. Have anyone heard of Panama City, Florida?
Been there.
Panama City, Florida was known then and probably now as the Redneck Riviera. So the only thing worse than going to Panama City, Florida in the 70s was going in the summer, for the entire summer. I mean, the only good time to live in New Jersey was the summer. So we would get schlepped off to Panama City. Now, people in Panama City had evidently never seen a Jew before. I remember we were loading up on gas when we first pulled in, and the gas station attendant heard my mother say something Jewish. I could have been anything, probably everything she says. And he was looking at my head, and then he looked at my butt, and then he looked at my head, and he looked at my butt. And finally I said, "What the hell are you looking at?" And he said, "Well, I was here to tell your mama says you're Jewish, so I was looking for your horns and your tail." This really did happen. So word got out around the town that Jews were there, and they didn't want to waste the opportunity. So the whole rollers figured they could maybe sing the Jew out of us. So we had this horrible little bungalow. I mean, it was just worse and worse and worse. No air conditioning, no TV. Our only entertainment was trying to kill these palmetto bugs that were like the size of my hand. We were like miserable and bored. One day, all these holy rollers come with tambourines, and they started singing for us. And I still remember the song. They went, "Oh yeah, all you Jewish people come out and pray. Jesus loves you anyway." I turned that into a Christmas carol one year. Only I added, "Jesus loves you anyway. Oy vey." So you know when you're a kid adults with respect. I mean, clearly you're supposed to do that. Well, my mother gave us permission to do anything we wanted to the Holy Rollers. So now we're 3 sweaty, bored, miserable kids. The Holy Rollers came, we stuck our nose out at them, our tongue out, we mooned them, we made faces, that was the highlight of our summer. We hoped they would come every day forever. But unfortunately, my mother had watched some cowboy and Indian movie that said Indians couldn't scalp you if you were insane. So she figured the Holy Rollers wouldn't be able to convert us if they thought we were insane. So we had all this backed up water under the sink, and she brought it out and threw it at the Holy Rollers and said, "You can't convert me because I'm a crazy lady!" And unfortunately, they never came back. That was the end of our entertainment. So from that point on, Panama City was pure misery. So when my mother said we were going to Florida, we assumed we were going to get dragged back to Panama City. But in fact, she had been bamboozled a deal for looking at some swampland, and she had gotten us a free vacation at the Dunes Hotel. And this is a swank 4-star hotel, like a Frank Sinatra hotel. We got there expecting to see 18-wheelers in the parking lot like all the usual hotels we stayed at. And in fact, there was valet parking. We saw the pool and we expected it to be like Swampland, like the usual places we stayed at. It was crystal blue and people offered you water with lemon floating in it. And I was there with my Michelin Tire Man outfit that I'd been hiding my boobs with. And I somehow looked around, I didn't see anyone I knew. I started to sort of take off layer after layer. So while my parents were around the pool figuring out what they could get for free, and my brother and sister were swimming, I took off my entire tire outfit to my one-piece Blue Light Special bathing suit. And I went out to the beach, and I put a towel down, and I felt the sun on my skin. I hadn't felt the sun on my skin in those whole 2 years of puberty. And some boys walked by and they whistled. And I just looked around assuming it was somebody else. But in fact, it was me. And then I went into the water and I felt almost like 2 years of that cocoon melting off me and floating away in the water. And when I got out of the ocean, a really, really handsome blonde man, I remember him as Brad Pitt. See? Perfect. He just went for me. And we wound up that night French kissing like there was no tomorrow. He was a 22-year-old Pensacola, Florida water skiing champion. And I told him I was 17, even though it was actually a month before my 14th birthday. Now, every rotten thing I probably ever did, I learned to do that summer. I smoked cigarettes, rolled joints, you name it. But that cocoon I was in disappeared. And the person who showed up to Rumson Fairhaven High School, where I know David from, was in fact sort of like a cross between Janis Joplin and Joan Jett. A kind of a badass rocker chick, who I have pretty much been ever since. And the first time anyone tried to pick on me at Rumson Fairhaven High School, they got a really hard fry boot kick right in the shin. So I tell everyone that the second time I was born happened in Miami. Like basically Slava Vida Shana, Magdalena, was lost at sea at the end of the 8th grade, and Rossi was born that summer in Miami. So now the whole badass rocker thing was working for me, and I kind of created a career when I was in high school. I was sort of an entrepreneur. I figured out a lot of people were selling joints that were not very good. So I rolled mine in pink rolling paper. I was branded, and I had a whole career going. I made kind of a lot of money. Eventually, I saved up like a few $1,000s. And 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I ran away from home. So now I picked an affordable hotel. This was a cheapo hotel in Long Branch, New Jersey, very low rent, and it was very famous for its high crime rate. So there were hookers and truck drivers and drug dealers, and it was me. I had this wild party, and I guess the manager of the hotel, he wasn't upset about the hookers or the dealers or the truck drivers or any of that, but the idea of a teenager, that made him nervous. For some reason, I had this party. To this day, I don't know why. I invited my high school friends over, and I invited some sailors over. To this day, I have no idea why. Now, I was 16 at the time, and when I was 16, I looked like I was 35. But my friends all looked like they were 16. So the police arrested me for corrupting minors. Now, if you were in Wellfleet, you know that that was the second time I was arrested. And I will tell you about the first time a little bit. So I got sent to the Long Branch police station, and they called my parents. Now, the last thing I had said to my father was, "You'll see how well I do." My father walked in and said, "Well, I'm glad to see you're doing so well." Now, what happened next, and probably the reason I had to write a book, was that my parents decided that I couldn't be on my own because I was having wild parties with sailors. I couldn't live with them because they couldn't handle me. So they delivered me to Crown Heights, Brooklyn in 1981 to a Hasidic rabbi who specialized in taking in wayward Jewish girls and turning them religious. So, you know, New Yorkers, they like to have this conversation because very rarely do you meet a New Yorker who's from New York. And the conversation will be like, how did you come to New York? Sometimes you'll win a free drink, like who has the most interesting I came to New York story. Very often it's like I came to go to NYU, or I fell in love, I got a great job. When I say I was sent to live with a Hasidic rabbi who turned around wayward Jewish girls, I always get the So now, I'm in Crown Heights, Brooklyn in 1981. My parents had sort of neglected to notice that Crown Heights in 1981 was probably one of the 3 most dangerous neighborhoods in New York. Like when you were in the little enclave of the Hasids, you were somewhat protected, but you took 1 foot out and it was like open season. So there I am, I'm kind of like, for me, I was like delivered to Mars with matzo balls. And I think the Hasids had a contest, like whoever could get me religious would get a toaster or something like that. I don't know what it was. But everyone wanted me over their house. I mean, now I think about it, I think they wanted me over because they wanted to hear my stories. They wanted to know, what was it like dating Christian boys? Ooh, you know, things like that. So I was kind of formulating my plan how I'm going to escape this neighborhood, and I knew the way I would have to do it was to get a job and to start having money. Like if I just ran away, what was the point? I had $6 left from my runaway fund. So I couldn't get a job that was anything to do with how I looked, because I had pink hair and I looked a little bit like Courtney Love on a really bad day. But I knew that I had a good phone voice, and when I saw an ad to sell the New York Times over the phone, I thought maybe I could do that. It said no experience necessary. I thought maybe I could do that. So I got hired selling the New York Times over the phone. Now the phone room has got maybe 50 people. I don't know if you've ever been to a phone room. It's really like people who could never be employed. You know, formerly homeless people, former prostitutes. You know, really, Lawrence Fishburne worked there actually, and Kevin Bacon worked there. So I had my speech that I was going to do, and so I started like, hello, Mrs. Smith, hang up. Hello, Mrs. Jones, hang up. You know, everyone I talked to hung up. So then during a break, there was a jazz musician next to me who looked a little bit like Richard Dreyfuss. He goes, I got to give you a tip. And I'm like, what's the tip? He goes, women are smarter than men. If you get a woman, just hang up on her. But if you get a man, then lower your voice a few octaves and see what happens. I'm like, I'll do anything, you know, I'm like batting 1,000 here. So I got a woman hang up, I got a man. Hello, Mr. Jones. Yes. Are you ready for me? Because I'm going to give it to you every day at 7 a.m. And I promise I will be there. I will never let you down. Are you ready to have 7 days of excitement in your life? Because I can give you that. Anyway, you get the idea. Well, from that point on, I became the #1 salesperson. It's like everyone bought it. By the time they figured out I was selling them the New York Times, you know, they were buying it anyway because I'd given them like 10 minutes of entertainment. And I started to little bit raunchier. I stayed relatively close to the script, but I morphed into like, Mr. Jones, are you ready for me? Things like that. One day, the head of the New York Times phone room or whatever, he wanted to know what I was doing so they could teach people. So they plugged into my phone from the observation. And I was on the phone with Mr. Smith, and I'm like, Mr. Smith, I know you want it. I look up in the observation room, they're like, so I lost that job. Anyway, from there I went through a lot of different jobs, and I eventually found bartending as my forte. And I was one of those old school kind of bartenders who has the same 30 people that never want to leave. And they would get drunk. I mean, the kitchen would close, and I'd have these 30 people at the bar with nothing to soak up all that alcohol but Pepperidge Farm goldfish. So I figured I have to feed them or they're going to throw up on the bar. So I went in the back, and there were always interesting things. I mean, there were always corn chips, and there was always some sort of cheese from the cheeseburgers or cheese from mozzarella sticks. So I started to invent the nacho of the night. And some of them are kind of fun, like tuna melt nachos, buffalo chicken nachos. So at midnight, having a buffalo chicken nacho is pretty awesome if you're drunk. And also they were free. After a while, I got kind of a cult following, and I realized that I was getting tired of talking to drunks, but I loved making the nachos. So I figured, maybe I should learn how to cook. And this is the 80s, and women were so not welcome in professional kitchens in the 80s. I mean, I never understood that. Like, you guys love your mother's home cooking, you love your wife's home cooking, and if you're straight, that is. I don't know if anyone here is straight. You love your wife's home cooking. What was the big deal about a woman in the kitchen? But no, they weren't having it. They would do anything to make me quit. Like, I got a job at Avery Fisher Hall. They fed, 10,000 people a day. So they had to hire me because they were afraid of a class action lawsuit. But they figured they'll make me quit. The first day I was there, they gave me 3,000 strawberries to dip in chocolate. And just kind of put me in the corner with no break of any kind. And everyone, I think they were betting. Everyone else spoke Spanish. I saw money exchanged. I think they were betting how long I would last. Now, what they didn't know was anyone who could live in Crown Heights for 2 years from 1981 on, who was a blonde white chick, could do anything. So 3,000 strawberries were not nearly as bad as a Jamaican street gang. But I also was blessed with a filthy mouth. I mean, I've calmed down because 12 years of WOMR, I have learned how to not curse. But, in the beginning, Diana mentioned to me that I was censored a few times. Like, I know you can't say certain words, but I was like, was I censored for saying fart once or something? I was like, I can fart? Okay, I won't, don't worry. But I'll tell you a fart story later. Anyway, so where was I? I got distracted with strawberries. Thank you. Let's see if Luke's awake. Vagina. So when I dipped my last strawberry, I went into the chef's office, and he was already like through a whole bottle of Jack Daniels. Back then, chefs were all drunks or heroin addicts or cokeheads, like Tony Bourdain, in his early days. And so I just proceeded to launch every curse I knew at him, and ended with some creative ones like Dingleberry douchebag. I sort of liked that one. And then I turned around to just leave, assuming I didn't get the job. But I didn't know I had seduced him with my filthy mouth. I said, wait, come back tomorrow, you got the job. And then I started my catering career. Now I'll tell you briefly how my Avery Fisher Hall career ended. The head overseer of all of the restaurant associates places was this very horrifying French man named Gerard Didida. And he had to say the D's 3 times. The only thing he hated more than women in the kitchen were Jews. Maybe it's a French thing, I don't know. And the only thing he hated more than Jews and women in the kitchen were gay people. So here we have a Jewish female lesbian, he wasn't having it. Back then we all smoked in the kitchen. just a side note. So there was always a glass full of cigarette butts and things like that. Now, we had a party for racial equality, and David Dinkins was the guest, and so it was exciting. Well, Gerard also was not fond of black people, I should mention that. So he did this very offensive menu of like ribs and fried chicken and mac and cheese. I mean, he was 2 steps from serving watermelon. It was like everything you could think of. And I was embarrassed by it. So I was trying to garnish the trays with orchids and fresh herbs, you know, to try to make it look not like what it was. And he came over, he took all my garnish and threw it in the garbage can and said, "They are only black anyway." And then his favorite way to degrade me was, even though I was the chef of the party, to tell me to go get him a drink. Get me a gin and tonic. So I took the cigarette glass, you know, with all the bunk of everyone's cigarettes, and I had the bartender fill it with gin and tonic. Gave it to Gerard, slugged it back, and he started going, "Qu'est-ce que c'est?" You know, he died. I said, "You are only French anyway." That was the end of Avery for sure. Now, I just want to tell you briefly, and I'm going to read a little to you if you wouldn't mind, about the 3rd time I was born. So at this point, this is 1992, and I've been cooking professionally for a long time. And I hadn't realized that all that Michelin Tire Man outfit that I had been hiding under when I was younger, I had something else. I had layers and layers of some sort of battle armor, like a don't mess with me armor. And the last chef job I had in the restaurant world was a place called Wunderbar. They had this idea to do a German Nouvelle supper club. And they hired me to do German Nouvelle food. It was horrifying. So I was trying to have a sense of humor about it. I did Spetzel Alfredo, you know, Schnitzel Marinara, you know, whatever I could think of. And then these nuclear pork chops crusted in hot Hungarian paprika. At that point, you could be made or broken by Gail Green from New York Magazine. So Gail Green came in, and she didn't really understand the magic, I guess. I didn't either. She ordered the pork chops, God help me. And the review came out, and they said that the pork chops seemed like they spent a week in Chernobyl. I was horrified. I was so heartbroken. One of my chefs said, you know, maybe you should just leave town, you know. I didn't know what to do, but I had a vacation coming. I was really depressed. My friend Anne Marie invited me to go out to Nevis. No one had been to. It was like, I think Lady Di, maybe had the other lady died, and maybe just gone. And it was really like, you really felt like you were in the middle of nowhere when you went there. So I went out to Nevis to drown my sorrows and eat some great food and just try to forget about what happened. And Anne-Marie said, "I'm going to cheer you up. I'm going to take you out for a sunset sail." And so she takes me to this rinky-dink boat, and there's this guy with no teeth, and he was playing tapes on a cassette player. I mean, a Michael Jackson tape that he thought was current, and you know, I don't think he'd seen a television or read a newspaper maybe ever. And he took us out to the sunset sail, and it was just great. We're in the middle of the ocean, and I'm just forgetting all my troubles, and so the guy says to me, "So what you do back there in the big city?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a chef at a place called Wunderbar." And he goes, "Oh." He goes, "Wunderbar. Ain't you the one that Gail Green said spent a week in Chernobyl?" I wanted to kill myself. Needless to say, I got laid off, and I took my unemployment check and I followed my sous chef Marta to Provincetown, Massachusetts in 1992 to change my life. Marta got me an apartment behind the L&A Market, the place that's Farland now, for $400 a month as long as I took everyone else's garbage out to the curb and brought it back in. It was $400 a month. They were just a horrible chicken coop of an apartment. The ceiling was insulation, and it was really kind of terrible. But it was walking distance from the beach, and I ran a little electric cord out to a beach chair, and I set up my electric typewriter, and I started typing. Somehow, between being so close to the beach and the beauty of the L&A Market dumpster. You know? Things just started coming out of me. So I got the idea that I would go to Provincetown magazine and see if they would let me write a column for them, maybe a food column. So I put on my baddest outfit, my biker boots and my whole outfit, and I showed up, and luckily the editor thought I was cute, and I got my very first column, which I wrote for Provincetown magazine for several years. And I mailed it to my mother. That very first column, I was making fun of my mother who stopped cooking when the microwave came. And I thought maybe I'd be in a lot of trouble when she got that. But in fact, she called me up, she was thrilled. She said, Shana Maynila, you've immortalized me. She cut it out and Xeroxed it and mailed it to every relative we ever had, people I didn't even know who the hell they were. She mailed it to Paris and Australia, God help these people. Every time I wrote a column, I mailed it to her and it went worldwide. Anyway, the thing is that something happened to me with that little electric typewriter. I could smell the beach and I could feel that great air and the beautiful dumpster, that I became uncorked. And I am not the vagina kind of uncorked. An emotional uncorking. I never got corked again. I started writing, and that first Provincetown magazine piece became the first chapter of the book. And everything after that changed. Uncorked as a chef, as a painter, as a person, and Provincetown became my other home from that point on. And so the fact that I'm here today at the radio station that is the reason the book happened, in the place that's the reason I'm a professional writer, is really like a full circle for me. So, in fact, I have been born 3 times. My mother would say 3 for the price of 1. It's not a bad deal.